So I thought I would try and write a death list, as that's my bag, and I actually pre-case this with struggling quite a lot actually to write a list. I looked at the OBR changes and I was trying to write an OBR list, but I just ended up back where I started with my Cadacross list, and I just thought that's going to be really boring if I say my list is exactly the same as what it was before. And all of the elite units that went down, I didn't take them because they're not Mortek Guard or Catacross. So I thought I won't do that. Then I looked at Nighthaunt and Flesh Eaters. And Flesh Eaters, I think you can write some decent lists around the Royal Mordant formation, and Crypt Horrors have changed. And I thought I could do it.
Like the distribution of their points, I think it's made things much more logical now. You're not pushed in one direction as much.
Yeah, I still don't think they've had enough reductions, and I think the Terrorgeists and Zombie Dragons are too pricey now, especially with the artifact changes and the changes to Unholy Vitality and things like that. So I think they're just overcosted. They're over like 400 points, and you look at some of the Greater Demons in Chaos, and they're not even close to that. And for me, I looked at it and go, they're just not as good. So I then went straight into Legion, and I was trying to write a Legion list, and I actually was looking at Soulblight quite heavily. But I just realised that Blood Knights are just a bad version of Kavalos Death Riders, so I just thought if I was going to write a cavalry army, I'm not going to take Soulblight. And although they've got some interesting artifacts, and there's a formation in there, which is the Castellans of the Bloodkeep, which is quite good, and you could give them all +2 move and fly. So I think you can write a decent Soulblight list, but I just didn't have the points. I just found that it was like 2 vampires and like 15 blood knights and some Vargeists, and that was it.
One of the difficulties of writing a Soulblight list with blood knights in it, at least, is if you run them in Legion of Blood with Neferata, all of them get 1 more attack, which is a big deal. Obviously, flying in +2 move is a big deal, but if you run them with Neferata, everyone having 4 attacks instead of 3 on the charge, that's absolutely huge.
Yeah, then you've got I did exactly what you just said. I basically started thinking it's better to run Blood with Blood Knights. I think the biggest thing, not getting the move and the fly, is pretty big. But essentially, I ended up with a rather unusual list, which I'm going to put up now, which is awesome. Legion of the Night. So here is my army list. It is basically Manfred, and he's the general, because he has to be. I've given him Pinions as his spell. I'll talk about that in a bit. Then I've got a White King with the Shard of Night artifact. And what that does is -1 to hit from shooting. A Necromancer with Morbideg's Claw, which it basically allows him to not move or fight, which you're not going to anyway. And he gets every wizard within 12 gets +2 to cast. So it allows you to push through Van Hels or Pinions if you really need to. And he's also got Overwhelming Dread. I think, in retrospect, because he's only get 1 spell and you're probably always going to be casting Van Hels, you probably want to put Overwhelming Dread on Manfred, but it does shut down your Alpha Strike a little bit. I'll talk about that in a minute. But then 40 Skeleton Warriors with Spears, 40 Skeleton Warriors with... I've got Blades, but you can have Blades or Spears, it doesn't really matter. And then 10 Skeletons, and 2 units of 6 Vargeists, and they are in the formation the Nightfall Pact. Now the Nightfall Pact is the entire army except for the 2 characters, the White King and the Necromancer. And
that's such a weird formation, isn't it?
It is a weird formation, but what it does is it makes your army a 3 drop. Now there is a variant of this where you reduce 1 Vargeist unit to 3, drop the White King and the Necromancer, and take another Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, and it's a 2-drop army. But I'll talk about why I didn't go that route in a sec. But essentially what you do is with Legion of Night gives you a couple of things. So one, it means all Death Rattle units that are in your territory are +1 save. It allows you, before the game starts, to take 3 units and put them in reserve. And then they can come on from the board edge at the end of your movement phase, 9 away, within 6 of a board edge. So it allows you to protect Manfred and the 2 units of Vargeist, or use them aggressively, whilst you still put 90 models on the table that have +1 armor save, that they're within range of the White King, so you can use a command ability that can +1 attack. They're within range of a deaf hero, so they get another bonus. I think it's an extra attack as well, and then they get to extra attacks for numbers. It might be reroll to hit actually. I don't know. They get some bonus for a hero being nearby, which escapes me. But basically, they get buffed by the heroes, and obviously the Necromancer can make them pile an attack twice. But, you know, Skeleton's going from a 5-up save against no rend, or no save against rend, to a 4-up save, or a 6-up, means them a lot more survivable. And also the Necromancer and White King can return models with the Deathless Invocation. And then you've also got the Grave Sites as well. So you could even put 40 skeletons for using the Legion of Night ability into like the night with, and keep MANNFRED on the table, because you come on at the end of the movement phase, so you wouldn't get to use the hero phase with MANNFRED. And MANNFRED gets an aura which allows him, all death units within 15, to reroll 1s to hit and to wound. So essentially you've got a massive blob of bodies which can sit at objectives that are battle line, can actually bully people off because they're quite aggressive, but you've also got this aggressive element of MANNFRED and the 2 Vargeists. Now what the formation does, it does 2 things. One, it allows you to re-roll the Deathly Invocation from MANNFRED, which only affects the skeletons, is not a big deal. The other thing is that it allows the Vargeists to get +1 attack on the charge. So they're already freeze and freeze damage 2, and they're quite fast. So you basically charge them in, and then if they're within range of MANNFRED, they're getting reroll 1s to hit and reroll 1s to wound. So they're pretty effective, and they are rend with damage 2. They are a bit fragile, and you can't heal them, but you can keep them off the table. So if you play somebody who's going to Alpha Strike you, then you can essentially set them off the table and be like, well, you can Alpha Strike my 90 skeletons with the death saves from the Necromancer and the White King in the middle of them, and you can't touch MANNFRED, and you can't touch the Vargeists because they're not on the table. And then also, because the MANNFRED can come on at the end of the movement phase, if they wipe out a unit of skeletons, you can put him on the end of the movement phase within a grave marker, and then put the 40 skeletons back on.
Unless you put your grave markers in probably weird places, doesn't it? Because you don't have to be able to reach there with your vanilla move. You can pop up from a board edge and then be like raising something behind someone. Or
well, that's the other thing as well. You could actually set them up from the grave marker from using the ability. I think that's end of move as well. I'd have to double check it. I know it's been FAQ'd a lot, and it's been a while since I played Legion, but essentially it's an army that it can deploy on the table. It's got some speed, so you can use pinions on MANNFRED. I mean, he's movement 16. He'll go up to movement 21. He's a little bit fragile, but you don't really want to launch him into something. But if you wanted to get to an objective late game that's got a small unit on, it just gives you that extra, because you could eventually be movement 26 if you rolled high enough.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, you're quite low drop as well, so that'll protect you against alpha strikes and stuff, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's got an alpha strike of its own, because you can, depending on how they've deployed, you might better come on from the board edge and go for some big charges early on. And then your skeletons can blob onto the objectives. So while they're fighting your vampire Vargeists and stuff that's all like blobbing around the board, they actually, I mean, you could keep them off the table for the first turn anyway. Just move the skeletons onto objectives and absorb the double turn.
You're not restricted to dropping them in any particular turn, are you? No. They can just come on as long as there's space.
And MANNFRED doesn't really need to be on the table, so you can keep them off the table and say, well, have your double turn at me. I'll go first, or whatever. You have your double turn, and then I'll bring them on then, and then I'll have my double turn. But with all the vampires flapping in your face.
What does the skeleton banner do again? Don't they have a slightly more reliable charge, or
it means they charge? No, I think it's that, or it's -1 bravery. I think that might be the musician, but
okay,
I can't remember. I think the banners depends on the unit. So, like, I think the Blood Knights have it that you guarantee a 6.
Yeah, something. I think skeletons might have that too.
I think they do. But
yeah. You definitely go with spears for the skeletons, wouldn't you? Especially with the potential of Van Helsing.
They're not as reliable hitting, but yeah, generally. I think, because of the depth. But you can go out in a big long line and still be. They've got a 1-inch reach, so you could be too deep. So
that'd look cool on the table as well. It'd look like an actual nice army as opposed to Manfred and his 15 dogs for battle line and the rest of the stuff. You know, so like it actually looks like a shambling undead horde, I would imagine.
Yeah, I wanted to. I tried to write a list that had 2 elements, so a hammer and anvil, a bit like classic Warhammer, and then I also wanted to play into the aesthetic of death of having using the things that Legion of Night benefited. And I think the skeletons getting +1 armor in their own territory is massive. And you know, you get an extra, because I got a formation, I get to have the 2 artifacts. Making sure you can push Van Hels through is massive in the right turn. And then you've also got the ability of the White King's got a command ability that gives them +1 attack as well. So I think you can get skeletons with 4 attacks if there's 30 of them or more, and you can get them on freeze to hit, re-rolling 1s, and then I think it's 4s to wound, re-rolling 1s. So it's just a lot of dice.
Yeah, it really is. Van Hels is until your next hero phase, isn't it?
Or is it in the next combat phase? So it's offensive really than anything else. But to be fair, he's still got overwhelming dread. That's the only change I'd probably make, is change that up, and maybe you want to give Manfred a heal, maybe you want to give him like a more wound output. There's loads of little stuff you can tweak around the edges. You could put the White King on a horse, and she probably would. You might drop the Necromancer and the White King and then put in like a Coven Throne. So there's lots of little changes you can make, but I think the fact that the White King and the Necromancer make the skeletons infinitely better, and you need more heroes, because I think you need at least 3 especially in the new missions. So I think this list is really good again in most missions. Where it's going to struggle is when it needs like Manfred to go out and like boss an objective and hold it. So it's gonna struggle in those kind of missions. But then if you manage to get a unit of skeletons with a Necromancer in the middle still on an objective, you're never getting them off. So it's just as effective.
You bubble
really.
wrap, don't you?
Yeah,
because you've got the bodies to bubble wrap on those hero missions. So
and with grave sites, you can do stuff like you don't have to rely on the infantry moving into position. You can run the hero up the table, and then you can use the grave site to deploy the unit that you set up in the graves, and they just basically bubble wrap around that objective. So you can, and because you're low drop, you can play for that. You can just go, well, I'm going to guarantee the board's position. So I think it's a really strong scenario army, because I don't think there's much stuff. I mean, you could smash 40 skeletons off, but then you're going to have the command ability to bring them back on as long as you set Manfred up in the grave sites in a logical place. And I think you set them up for that kind of play rather than healing. So it'd be an interesting army to play with.
I think it'd be good in like hero missions, like 3 places and stuff, wouldn't it? Because you just, if you outdrop your opponent, get Manfred directly onto one of the objectives, and then have the gravesite nearby and bubble wrap him with the skeletons there. You've got the movement then, especially in the way the new missions are set up, how far apart those objectives are for like foot slogging heroes. It means that you can get one of those objectives early doors and then work on getting the next one.
Well, that's why the White King would be on a horse, because it makes him movement 10 or 12. So you'd put him on a horse every day. It doesn't cost any more points. And he's got a 3-up armor save. But he's Death Rattle as well. So he's got a 2-up save in your territory.
Pretty good first turn, isn't it?
It's not bad, is it? And also he's -1 to hit from shooting. So he's a little bit vulnerable, but I think mortal wounds is the problem if you play anything that could do mortals to him. But that was the list, and I thought the Vargai Snake a nice strike unit. You might, after play, decide that they don't do enough and they're not really good, and then you drop the formation, you drop the Vargeist, but the army becomes a very different animal. But I was trying to write a death list that could compete in the missions. But
your Vargeists, they benefit from Van Hels, don't they? You can cast it on any...
No, I don't think so. Because they're not... There's certain types of units you can cast on. I don't think they're one of them. So.
Okay. So I was going to say you could run them as a 9 to benefit better from that, but 2 6s makes loads of sense then in that case.
I mean, yeah, you could run a 9 and a 3 if you wanted to. because that might change your mind about what you put off the table. Because the Legion of Night, you could set up 40 skellies, the 10 skellies and the 6, 1 unit of Vargeis, and put the 9 on the table, put 3 off and then put 9 on behind a wall of skellies with both characters and Manfred, and have that deployed and have the other stuff as your second wave. But I quite like
really annoying.
It almost turns it into a little bit of a Flesh Eaters army with the way you get things coming on for the edges. It's very weird, but I quite like it. I don't know, for me it seems like it would be interesting to play with. I don't think it's the most effective death army, but it would be fun. And
it would look great. Les is right. You've got your big boy, medium fleshy things, and then loads of dead things with spears. Your wound count's crazy as well. You're on more than 150 wounds.
Yeah, it's 159.
Average wounds is like 110, and yours come back, and some of them have got boosted saves and whatever.
Yeah, you'd have to... one of the things I would kind of hate is rolling all the dice for the skeletons and casualty removal and all that, but hopefully it grinds your opponent into boredom, so you do just concede.
Start making mistakes because I'm bored,
No, well, that's why I've got the other element to it, because I think you need to have something that can do damage and can go out and get objectives and kill stuff. And it might be the fact that you tar pit with the skellies, and then you come on with the vampires and you sweep across the board.
I think it plays into the IP, doesn't it? It's like you've got your skeletons holding stuff, and then the rest of it, like, they're not the heavy hitters, they're the guys that pin the units.
No, but you will die to them if you get into a drawn-out battle, because the sheer amount of damage.
And they don't. It's a battle of attrition, right? That's always the things with units that come back. If you've got your 5 liberators going into 20 skeletons and they kill 7 and then 3 come back, and it really makes a big difference. I think it plays to your strength for us, because you've got, if people know what they're doing, you've got the threat of all the attacks from the skeletons, as well as fast-moving, flexible stuff with drops. But if people don't know so much what they're doing, they're probably going to think that the skeletons are resilient but don't hit hard, and you can lure them into something and then hit them with 40 guys with spears twice that are hitting on 2s and wounding on 4s, which is enough to wipe out most things in the game that don't have high arm.
Yeah, no, it doesn't need the command points early game if you keep Manfred off the table, which allows you to stock up later on for the attack spell and Manfred's bubble. But yeah, that's what I would take if I could just have it and don't have to paint it. But that's that was the death list I come up with.
Wraithbone Skeleton Horde. Done.
Yeah.
It's not though, is it?
That's cool.
Then we all know that's not true.
No.
It's the mold lines. It's like when you're there scraping all the spears and sticking them all together, and you're like, I've done 90 of these. And then you play a game of it and go, that wasn't very good. I should just take Cannon Cross. But there's an interesting Death Army if someone wants to give that a go. We'll probably put a bundle up on Element if someone wants to have a go at buying that and giving it a go. And I think you can get the Skellies and the Mortark in one box in a start collecting.
Yeah.
So we'll put a bundle up for that if you fancy giving that a go. And if you do, I'd be great to see your progress and hear how you get on with it. And be happy to talk about tweaks and stuff. And then you can tell me I'm wrong and it's rubbish. But no refunds.
Let us know your thoughts. If you change one thing, if you don't like the formation, if you've got suggestions as a way to improve it, then by all means let us know. And if you want to build one and paint one and send it to Russ, he won't say no either. I'm
not going to do that unless you want to pay a stupid amount of money. No, this is a starting point. So this would be, I've not played any games, so you might play 2 games and realise there's some simple changes to make which make a big difference, but that'll come down to your play style. But there's my General's Handbook 2020 Death List.
Cool.